The brush trembled in her hand, and Zhang Wei knew she had made a mistake. Not in the line she had just painted. That sweep of black across cream silk was perfect, would become the wing of a crane once she added the details. But in looking up at precisely the wrong moment to find General Shen's eyes on her face instead of on the painting. She was 19 years old and had been a man for 3 years. Before that, she had been Zhang Huiying, daughter of a disgraced court painter who had chosen death over dishonor when his patron fell to political intrigue. Her mother had made a different choice. Her mother had sold what could be sold, including herself, to keep her daughter fed through one bitter winter. Then she had dressed that daughter in her dead father's clothes, cut her hair with kitchen shears, and sent her north with her father's painting supplies and a new name, Zhang Wei, the servant who had ground her father's ink and stretched his canvases, a real boy who had died of fever the year before. No one in the capital had known him well. No one would question. Her mother had not asked if Huiying wanted this. There had been no time for wanting. There had been only the choice between survival and pride, and her mother had already learned which of those could be eaten. That had been 3 years ago. Zhang Wei, she thought of herself as Wei now, had trained herself to answer to it even in her dreams, had walked into the household of General Shen Zhaoyun. With her father's second-best brushes and a letter of introduction she had forged herself. The general collected beauty the way other men collected weapons. He had a garden that made visiting officials weep, a library of books that would have been worth a fortune if he ever considered selling them, and a quiet, persistent desire to be painted into immortality by someone with actual skill. Wei's father had possessed that skill. Wei possessed enough of it, learned at her father's side, from the time her hands were large enough to hold a brush. To maintain the fiction, she painted the general's garden. She painted his favorite horse. She painted his aged mother in the year before she died. And the old woman had gripped Wei's hand afterward and told her she had kind eyes for a young man. Wei had thanked her and fled to her small room in the servants' quarters and pressed her face into her pillow, though whether she was laughing or crying she could not have said. The general's household was a strange place, neither fish nor fowl. He had never married, which occasioned gossip that he ignored with the serenity of a man who had killed enough of his emperor's enemies to be forgiven any eccentricity short of treason. His mother had managed his household until her death, and after that, the place had simply continued to run itself through the competence of servants who had been there for decades. Wei occupied an odd position in this ecosystem, too educated to be a common servant, too useful to be dismissed, too low-born to eat with the general, but often summoned to his presence to discuss compositions and color. It was during these discussions that Wei had begun to understand. She was in danger of a completely different kind than discovery. She liked him. This was inconvenient. This was more than inconvenient. It was a threat to the careful neutrality she had cultivated, the studied averageness that kept her safe. She liked the way he looked at paintings, the way he would tilt his head and consider a work for long minutes before speaking. She liked that he asked her opinion and listened to her answers. She liked his hands, which was an entirely inappropriate thing to notice about one's employer, but which she could not seem to stop noticing, long-fingered and scarred, a scholar's hands that had been forced to learn the sword. And now, on this spring morning, with the painting of cranes half finished between them, he was looking at her in a way that made her certain he had noticed something. She did not know what. She was careful. She bound her chest every morning with strips of cloth that left marks on her ribs. She kept her hair in the style of a young man who had not yet begun to grow a proper beard. She had trained her voice to sit in a lower register, had learned to walk with longer strides, had cultivated the awkward mannerisms of a youth who had not quite grown into his limbs. But something in her face just now, some unguarded moment, had made the general pause. "Wei," he said, and his voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. "How old are you truly? You came to me 3 years ago and said you were 16, but you have the hands of someone who has been painting much longer than that." Relief loosened her shoulders. This was a question she could answer. "I began learning when I was very young, my lord. My master started teaching me when I was barely more than a child. He said I had a good eye." It was even true. Her father had let her watch him paint from the time she could sit still, had put a brush in her hand when she was 5. That she had been his daughter and not his servant was a detail that could be omitted. The general nodded slowly. He did not look away from her face. Your master taught you well. These cranes, they have a quality I have seen in only a handful of paintings. There is life in them. They are not merely well executed. They breathe. You honor me, my lord. I am considering commissioning something more ambitious, he said. A series of panels for the main hall. The Four Seasons, perhaps, or scenes from the classics. Something that would take time, months perhaps. I would pay you properly, of course. You would continue to have your room and board, and a salary appropriate to the work. Wei's hands had gone still. Months more in this household. Months more of this careful performance, this exhausting half-life. Months more of watching the general move through his beautiful spaces and knowing she could never tell him what she was, could never allow herself to feel what she was beginning to feel. But also months more of painting. Months more of doing the work her father had loved. The work she had been born to do. Months more of safety, of regular meals, of a small room that was hers, and a garden she could walk in. Months more of pretending. But what was her life now if not pretending? At least here the pretense came with beauty. I would be honored, my lord, she said. His smile changed his entire face. He was a handsome man, which was another thing she had taught herself not to notice. In his early 30s, with the kind of austere features that looked severe until he smiled. Good, he said. We will discuss the details. But not today. I have a visitor arriving this afternoon, and I must prepare. He paused. My younger cousin's child. The boy is 7 and has apparently been sent to me for the summer, because his tutors have declared him unteachable, and his mother is at her wits' end. Wei had met the general's extended family only in passing. They appeared occasionally for festivals, a rotating cast of cousins and second cousins and relations by marriage. She had learned to be especially invisible during these visits. I am certain the household will manage, my lord, she said carefully. I am certain the household will be turned upside down, the general said. But he sounded amused rather than annoyed. Jingshan is a force of nature in a very small body, but he is a good boy, underneath the chaos. His mother, well, she made the marriage she had to make. The boy's father is a powerful man, and not a kind one. I see her at most once a year, and she always looks more tired. Sending Jingshan away for the summer is the closest she can come to keeping him safe from his father's expectations. There was something in his voice when he spoke of his cousin, a sadness that made Wei understand that this was another person the general collected, another beautiful thing he wanted to protect. She wondered if he knew he did this, built himself a household of strays and treasures. She wondered if he knew she was both. The boy arrived in a crash of noise and motion that proved the general's predictions accurate. Wei was in the garden, sketching preliminary studies of peonies, when she heard the commotion from the front courtyard. A child's voice raised an argument, an adult voice attempting reason, and then the sound of running feet. A small person exploded around the corner of the garden path and nearly collided with her. Wei had a brief impression of a thin, serious face, large eyes, expensive clothing already disheveled from travel. The boy skidded to a halt, breathing hard, and looked up at her with the frank curiosity of someone too young to have learned to dissemble. Are you the painter? He demanded. Wei set down her sketchbook. I'm a painter, yes. My name is Zhang Wei. I am Shen Jingshan, the boy announced. My mother says you're very talented, and my cousin is very lucky to have you. She likes your painting of the winter garden. She says it makes her feel peaceful. This was unexpected. Wei had not known the general shared her paintings with his family, had certainly not known they traveled far enough to be seen by a cousin who visited once a year. Something warm and dangerous bloomed in her chest, and she crushed it down ruthlessly. I'm glad it pleased her, Wei said. Jingshan flopped down on the grass beside her bench, with the absolute disregard for propriety that only 7-year-old boys and emperors could manage. I hate tutors, he announced. They want me to sit still all day and memorize boring things. My mother says I have to learn to be a scholar because my father will never let me be anything interesting. But Cousin Shen says there are many ways to be interesting, and some of them involve books. He squinted up at Wei. Are you interesting? Wei could not help it. She laughed. It burst out of her before she could think to modulate it. And for a moment she sounded like herself, like Huiying, who had laughed freely before the world had taught her that freedom was a luxury. She caught herself, coughed, tried to recover. But Jingshan was already moving on, attention caught by her sketchbook. Is that a peony? You made it look like it is moving. How did you do that? And because he was a child, and because he had no investment in her disguise, and because there was something about his frank, open face that made her forget to be careful, Wei found herself explaining. She showed him how the angle of the brush created movement, how negative space could suggest wind, how sometimes what you did not paint was as important as what you did. Jingshan listened with gratifying attention. Then he said, "Will you teach me to paint? Mother says ladies paint, but I'm not going to be a lady. I'm going to be a person who does interesting things, so I should learn anyway." Wei thought of her mother, who had painted when there was time, small, quick sketches on cheap paper. Her mother, who had married a painter and loved him, and then sold herself to keep their daughter alive. Her mother, who had made impossible choices and never complained about them where her daughter could hear. "Yes," Wei said, "I will teach you." This was how the summer began. Jingshan was, as advertised, unteachable in the conventional sense. He could not sit still for long, could not be made to care about classical texts, would argue with the sky if he thought it was being unreasonable. But he took to painting with the single-minded intensity of a small creature imprinting on the first thing it saw. He followed Wei around the garden, asked endless questions, covered himself in ink with cheerful regularity, and produced paintings that were chaotic and terrible and occasionally, unexpectedly, showed flashes of genuine feeling. The general watched this development with poorly concealed amusement. "You have achieved what 5 tutors could not," he told Wei one evening, coming upon them in the garden where Wei was attempting to explain perspective, while Jingshan painted a truly deranged version of the koi pond. "He is learning discipline. He is learning to channel chaos into art," Wei corrected. "It is not the same thing." "It is a start." The general crouched down beside Jingshan, studying the painting with the same serious attention he gave Wei's work. "Tell me about this fish." "It is angry," Jingshan said, "because someone tried to catch it. See? Its mouth is open. It is biting." "I see. And this one?" "That one is laughing at the other fish for getting caught." Fish are mean sometimes. Wei says we should paint true things, not just pretty things. The general's eyes flicked to Wei's face, and there was something in them she could not read. "Did he say that?" "He says lots of interesting things," Jingshan said. "He is my favorite person in this house, except for you and Cook. Cook gives me extra dumplings." "A man of excellent priorities," the general murmured. He straightened, still looking at Wei. "Walk with me a moment?" It was not a request. Wei cleaned Jingshan's brushes, extracted a promise that he would not paint the koi themselves, and followed the general into the winding paths of the garden. It was early evening, the air thick with the scent of jasmine. The light was golden, turning everything soft. "He adores you," the general said after a moment. "I have not seen him this happy since before his father began to take real interest in his upbringing." "He is a good child," Wei said. "Fierce and bright and good, like his mother." The general's voice was quiet. "She was like that too, before she married, before she learned to be smaller." He paused at a bend in the path, where a small pavilion overlooked a pond. "Wei, I want to ask you something, and I want you to know you may refuse." Wei's heart began to beat faster. This was it then. He had realized. He had determined she was a fraud. A liar, a woman in a dead boy's clothes. She wondered if she could run, if she had time to gather her things. She wondered if she had anywhere left to run to. "I am considering asking my cousin if Jingshan might stay longer than the summer," the general said. "Perhaps permanently. His father. Well, let us say I have reasons to believe the boy would be safer here. But I am a single man, and I know nothing of raising children. I was never meant to be a father." He looked directly at Wei. "But I think I could learn, with help. I would like to engage you not just as a painter, but as a tutor. A companion for the boy. I think you are teaching him more than painting. I think you are teaching him that there are ways to be in this world that his father would never show him." Wei could not breathe. This was not discovery. This was something else entirely, something more dangerous because it was good. It was the offer of a place, a purpose, a reason to stay. It was the general telling her she mattered, that her presence had value beyond the beauty she could create with a brush. It was a trap of kindness, and she was walking into it with her eyes open. "I would be honored, my lord," she heard herself say. The general smiled, and the warmth of it was almost painful. "Good," he said. "That is good. I am glad you are here, Wei. I find I have become accustomed to your presence." He said it simply, as if it were an uncomplicated truth, as if there were not 1,000 complications tangled in Wei's chest, 1,000 reasons this could only end poorly. But she smiled back, because she was tired of pretending she did not want this, even if she could never have all of it. "I am glad to be here, my lord." Summer deepened into autumn. The general wrote to his cousin, and after much back and forth, an agreement was reached. Jingshan would stay, ostensibly to continue his education in the general's household. In truth, everyone understood what was happening, a mother finding the only way she could to save her son from his father's cruelty. An impossible choice, to give him up in order to keep him safe. Wei thought of her own mother every time she saw Jingshan's face light up over some new discovery. She thought of her mother's hands cutting her hair, her mother's voice telling her to be careful, to be smart, to survive. She thought of all the ways love could look like loss. Jingshan, for his part, seemed determined to express his gratitude by ensuring Wei and the general spent as much time together as possible. It started subtly. He would ask painting questions that required the general's input, would insist that both of them needed to see the way the light hit the chrysanthemums at precisely this hour, would suddenly develop an urgent need for Wei to explain composition while the general was in the room. Then it became less subtle. "Wei says the garden looks different at night," Jingshan announced one evening at dinner. He had recently been promoted to eating with the general rather than with the servants, a change that had thrilled him and scandalized the older staff. Wei still ate separately, but Jingshan had opinions about this. "He should walk with you to see the moon on the pond, cousin, for painting purposes." "Should he?" the general said, amused. "Yes, it is important for art." "Wei, you agree it is important for art?" Wei, who had been summoned to receive notes on the seasonal panels she was painting, kept her face carefully neutral. "Observation is always valuable." "See?" Jingshan looked triumphant. "You should go tonight, both of you. I will stay here and practice my brush strokes." "You will go to bed at a reasonable hour," the general said. "I will go to bed after you go look at the pond," Jingshan countered. The general looked at Wei. There was something in his expression, a question and an apology, and something else that made Wei's carefully constructed defenses feel paper-thin. "I would not object to a walk if you are willing. The boy is not wrong about the moon." So Wei found herself walking the garden paths at night, the general beside her. The autumn air cool against her face. The moon was indeed beautiful on the pond, turning the water to hammered silver. They stood in silence for a time, and Wei thought about all the ways this moment was impossible. She was not who he thought she was. She could never be who he might want her to be. This careful peace they had built was founded on a lie that grew more complex with every passing day. "He is trying to matchmake," the general said quietly. "You have noticed." Wei's throat closed. "My lord, Do not apologize. I know you have done nothing to encourage it. Jingshan has simply decided we are both too serious and would benefit from companionship. He told me so quite directly." The general smiled faintly. "He has his mother's conviction that the world can be fixed if people would simply be reasonable." "He is young," Wei managed. "He is." The general paused. "Wei, I want you to know that I value you. Your work, yes, but also your presence, your perspective, the way you see the world. I know the difference in our stations makes friendship complicated, but I hope you consider me something more than merely an employer. Friend." It was more than she should want, and infinitely less than what she was beginning to realize she did want. Wei looked at the moon on the water and thought about her mother, who had loved a painter and lost everything. "I consider you a good man, my lord," she said. "That is rarer than you might think." They stood together in the garden. Not quite friends, not quite something else, and overhead the moon traced its arc toward winter. The panels were nearly complete by the time the first snow fell. Wei had worked on them obsessively through the autumn, pouring into them everything she could not say aloud. The spring panel showed new growth, delicate and determined. Summer was lush, almost overwhelming in its abundance. Autumn had a quality of gentle sorrow, beautiful things preparing to end. And winter she had painted last, and it showed bare branches against snow, and in the corner, almost hidden, 2 cranes standing together against the cold. The general came to see them on the day she added the final touches. He stood before them for a long time, moving from one to the next, and Wei watched his face and knew he saw what she had put there. All the longing and careful distance, all the beauty and impermanence, all the ways she had learned to say true things in paint, because she could not say them any other way. "They are extraordinary," he said finally. His voice was rough. "Wei, I have seen paintings in the imperial collection that are less alive than these. Your master taught you better than you claimed. Or you are better than even you know. I had good teachers, my lord, her father, her mother, the world itself, which had taught her how to look at beauty and how to survive its loss." He turned to look at her directly. "I want to show these to a friend who has connections to the imperial court. With work like this, you could have real commissions, not just from eccentric generals. You could make a name for yourself." Terror spiked through her. A name. Recognition. The kind of attention that would mean scrutiny, investigation, questions about her history that she could not afford to answer. She had worked so hard to be unremarkable, to be useful, but not notable. This would undo all of it. "My lord, I am content here. I do not need—" "You are wasted here," he said, and there was a fierceness in it that caught her off guard. "You have a gift that deserves to be seen, to be celebrated. I would not keep you in obscurity out of selfishness." "It is not obscurity if I choose it," Wei said, and heard the desperation in her own voice. "Please, I am grateful for your regard, but I cannot. I do not want that kind of attention." He studied her face, and she saw the moment he realized there was something more here, some reason beyond modesty. "Wei," he said carefully, "is there something you need to tell me?" "Yes. Everything. The truth of who she was, who her father had been, why she could never accept the kind of recognition he wanted to give her. The truth of what she felt when she looked at him, what she had been feeling for months now, careful and terrified and utterly hopeless. But Jingshan chose that moment to barrel into the room, because the universe had a sense of humor and also impeccable timing. Wei, you have to come. There is a bird in the kitchen, and Cook is going to murder it, or possibly me. I may have left a window open." He skidded to a halt, taking in the 2 adults standing very close together, the way they both looked startled and hunted. "Oh, were you having an important conversation? Mother says I'm not supposed to interrupt those. But also there really is a bird, and Cook really is very angry." The general closed his eyes briefly. "I will deal with the bird. Wei, we will speak later." But they did not speak later because the bird incident turned into a flooded storeroom, unrelated but concurrent. And then a messenger arrived from the capital, and the general was called away on some military matter. He left early the next morning with apologies and a promise to return within the week. And Wei was left alone with Jingshan and her panels and the uncomfortable knowledge that she was living on borrowed time. Jingshan, perceptive in the way children could be, knew something was wrong. "Did you argue with Cousin Shen?" he asked, watching Wei mix ink with more force than strictly necessary. "No. We had a disagreement, perhaps, but not an argument." "Mother and father have disagreements," Jingshan said. "They make the whole house cold. You and Cousin Shen are not like that. You make things warm." He paused. "You should marry him." Wei's brush clattered against the inkstone. "Jingshan, that is not possible." "Why not? You like him. He likes you. I like both of you. It seems very simple." "It is not simple." Wei tried to find words that a 7-year-old would understand, words that would not reveal too much. "There are many kinds of liking. Not all of them mean marriage. Mother says she married my father because her family needed the alliance. She says if she could have chosen, she would have chosen differently. She says impossible things are only impossible until someone does them." Jingshan tilted his head. "You are afraid." "Yes," Wei thought. "I am terrified." "Sometimes fear is wise," she said instead. "And sometimes it is just fear," Jingshan countered. "That is what Cousin Shen tells me when I am afraid of my father's letters. He says fear is information, not a command." Wei looked at this fierce, bright child who had somehow become precious to her, who was another complication in a life that was already too complicated. She thought about his mother making impossible choices. She thought about her own mother doing the same. "You are too clever for 7, she told him. "I know," he said, untroubled. "Are you going to leave?" The question landed like a blow. "What makes you think that?" "You have the same look mother gets sometimes, like you are figuring out how to say goodbye." His lower lip trembled, just slightly, before he controlled it. "I do not want you to leave. You promised to teach me painting." "I am teaching you painting." "You promised to keep teaching me. That is a different thing. Promises that stop are just things people say to be nice." Wei put down her brush. She knelt so she was at eye level with him. "Jingshan, I will keep my promise, but I cannot promise I will be here forever. No one can promise that. Cousin Shen would want you to stay forever. He looks at you the way grandfather looked at grandmother in the painting. Mother told me about it. She says that is how people look when they are in love, but do not know how to say it. In love." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and essential. Wei wanted to deny it, to laugh it off as a child's misunderstanding. But she was so tired of lying, and Jingshan's eyes were too sharp and too kind. "Sometimes love is not enough," she said quietly. "Sometimes there are reasons people cannot be together, even if they want to be." "What reasons?" "Complicated ones. That is what adults say when they do not want to explain." But Jingshan pressed himself against her in an impulsive hug, small and fierce. "I think you should try anyway. I think the reasons are probably stupid." Wei held him and said nothing, because what could she say? That he was right? That she was in love with his cousin, impossibly and irrevocably? That every day she stayed made it worse, and every day she stayed was still better than leaving? The general returned 4 days later, and with him came trouble. Wei knew something was wrong the moment she saw his face. He dismounted in the courtyard with the careful movements of a man who was injured or exhausted or both. And when he saw her standing there, his expression did something complicated. "Wei, good. I need to speak with you, privately." Her heart began to hammer. This was it. Someone from the capital had recognized her father's style. Someone had asked questions. Someone had discovered the truth, and now the general knew, and everything was ending. She followed him to his study, mind racing through possibilities. She could run. She had done it before, but running meant leaving Jingshan, leaving the only place she had felt safe in 3 years, leaving him. The general closed the door, turned to face her. "I met someone in the capital who knew your master." Wei's vision narrowed. "My lord, I can explain. He told me Zhang Huiying died 3 years ago." The general's voice was very quiet. "The painter who trained you, the man I thought was your master. He died when his patron was executed for treason, and his family disappeared. His wife and daughter, both gone. No one knows what became of them." The room was too small. The air was too thin. Wei could not breathe properly, could not think past the roaring in her ears. "The servant boy, Zhang Wei, died around the same time. Fever, I was told. But no one seems to remember him very well. Convenient, that." The general took a step closer. "I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to trust me enough to answer truthfully. Are you in danger? Is someone looking for you?" Wei's throat worked. She could lie. She was good at lying now, had 3 years of practice. But she was also so tired, and he was looking at her with concern rather than anger, and she had already lost this. She might as well lose it honestly. "I am Zhang Huiying's daughter," she said. Her voice sounded strange, higher than the register she had trained into it, more like herself. "My mother dressed me as the servant boy to keep me safe. We thought if anyone knew Zhang Huiying had a daughter who could paint like him, they would look for me. Use me or kill me, depending on who found me first, so she made me into someone else." The silence stretched. The general's face was unreadable. "So you are not a young man," he said finally. "No, my lord. You are Zhang Huiying's daughter, trained by one of the finest painters of the last generation." "Yes, my lord." "And you have been maintaining this disguise for 3 years, living as a man in my household, because you believed it was the only way to survive." "Yes." It came out as barely a whisper. The general sat down heavily. He did not look at her. "Your mother," he said. "What happened to her?" "I do not know. She sent me away and told me not to come back. She said she would find a way to survive, but I needed to go, needed to become someone else. I do not know if she..." Wei's voice cracked. I do not know if she is alive. And you have been alone. Yes. He was quiet for a long moment, then, take off your hat. Wei's hands shook as she removed it. Her hair had grown in the 3 years, not long enough to be properly feminine, but too long for a man's current style. She had been careful to keep it covered, always. Look at me, the general said. She did. Met his eyes for the first time without the shield of her disguise, without pretending. Let him see her. You are terrified, he said. Of course you are. You think I'm going to expose you or send you away, or… He stopped. Wei, Zhang Huiying. What do you prefer I call you? It was not the question she had expected. I have been Wei for so long. Huiying feels like someone who died, someone I buried. Wei then. He stood, moved closer. I'm not going to expose you. I'm not going to send you away. I'm not going to do anything except ask, what do you want? What did she want? The question was too large. She wanted her father back. She wanted her mother safe. She wanted a world where she did not have to choose between survival and truth. She wanted, I want to stay, she whispered. I want to paint. I want to watch Jingshan grow up. She stopped, unable to say the rest. What else? His voice was gentle, relentless. I want things I cannot have. Such as, she looked at him. This good man who collected broken things and tried to keep them safe. This general who had killed for his emperor but who spent his evenings talking about art and beauty. This person who had somehow become the center of her carefully guarded heart. You, she said. I want you, which is impossible and foolish, and I know it. I have known it. But you asked what I want, and that is what I want. The general closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there was something in his face that made her chest ache. Not impossible, he said. Complicated, yes. Difficult, certainly, but not impossible. My lord, Shen Zhaoyun, he said. If you are going to tell me what you want, you should at least use my name. Zhaoyun. It felt too intimate on her tongue, too real. I am a woman living as a man in your household. I am the daughter of a disgraced painter. I cannot give you children or heirs or a normal marriage. I can give you nothing but complications. You give me your paintings, he said. You give me your perspective. You have given me months of your company, and they have been the best months I can remember in recent years. You make this house feel like a home rather than a museum. You make me feel less alone. He reached out slowly and touched her face with gentle fingers. If you do not want me, tell me and we will find another arrangement. You can stay, continue as you have been, and I will not press this. But if you do want me, if that was true, then we will find a way. I have spent my life solving impossible problems. This is just one more. Wei could not stop the tears that slid down her face. I do not know how to be a woman anymore. I have been Wei for so long. Then be Wei. He smiled, small and sad and hopeful. Be whoever you are. I do not need you to be anything other than yourself. You do not even know who that is. I do not know who that is. Then we will figure it out together. It was too much. It was more than she had ever thought to ask for. Wei leaned into his hand, this touch she had never allowed herself to imagine, and let herself shake apart in the safety of his study. He held her while she cried, this general who had learned gentleness late, and when she finally quieted, he said, We should probably tell Jingshan. He's going to be insufferable about being right. Wei laughed, watery and genuine. He has been plotting this for months. I know. He told me I was being foolish and wasting time. A 7-year-old lectured me on seizing happiness. Zhaoyun shook his head. He is his mother's son. She must be extraordinary. She is. She made impossible choices and lived with them. Like your mother, like you. He drew back enough to look at her properly. Wei, I cannot make this easy. I can keep you safe in this household, can ensure no one asks too many questions, but I cannot give you a normal life. I stopped expecting normal 3 years ago. Then what can I give you? She thought about it. Really considered it, this gift he was offering. Time, she said finally. Let me stay as Wei. Let me paint and teach Jingshan and be with you however we can manage that. Do not make me choose between surviving and being honest. Let me have both, for as long as we can make it last. And when it cannot last, Then we will have had something beautiful anyway. He kissed her then, careful and questioning, and Wei kissed him back with 3 years of loneliness and longing and fear transmuted into something that felt almost like hope. The years that followed were strange and precious and borrowed. Wei remained Wei in the household, the general's painter and Jing Shan's tutor. But in the private spaces of their lives, she was also herself. Whatever self that was, woman and man and artist and survivor, all of it true at once. Zhaoyun did not ask her to change her appearance or abandon her disguise. He seemed to understand that Wei was not a costume she could simply remove. It was armor that had become part of her skin, and she needed it still. So she continued to bind her chest and dress in men's clothes. And in return, he gave her the gift of not pretending their situation was simpler than it was. They could not marry, not publicly. But in the second winter of this strange new arrangement, Zhaoyun took her to a small temple in the mountains, and they made vows to each other in front of a monk who asked no questions. It was not legal, it was not conventional, but it was real, and that was enough. Jing Shan, when he was told, in carefully edited terms, that Wei was not precisely what he seemed, and that he and the general had reached an understanding, had been predictably smug. I told you the reasons were stupid, he said. Complicated, Wei corrected. Stupid, Jing Shan insisted. But I am glad you're staying. Both of you are less sad now. It is much better. He was 12 by then, growing tall and still painting with chaotic enthusiasm. His mother visited when she could. And there was a sadness in her eyes when she looked at her son that Wei recognized. The grief of impossible choices. The knowledge that safety sometimes looked like separation. Wei painted her once, in private, showed the portrait to Zhaoyun, who looked at it for a long time. You painted her the way she was, he said quietly, before she had to become smaller. Everyone should be painted the way they were meant to be, Wei said, before the world taught them otherwise. She gave the portrait to Jing Shan's mother the next time she visited. The woman wept when she saw it, and Wei understood she was weeping for many things, for the girl she had been, for the choices she had made, for the son she had saved by giving him away. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me, for helping him see who he could be. He would have found his way regardless, Wei said. He is fierce, like his mother. Fierce is easier when you have people who let you be fierce safely. She touched Wei's hand briefly. My cousin is lucky to have you. I hope he knows that. I am the lucky one, Wei said, and meant it. But luck, like all things, was temporary. The trouble came in the spring of Wei's 6th year in the general's household. A new minister of rights, zealous and ambitious, began investigating cases of historical treason, looking for anyone who might have escaped justice. Zhang Huiying's name appeared on a list. Questions were asked about his family, his associates, his students, and someone, somewhere, remembered a servant boy who had carried the dead painter's supplies north. Zhaoyun heard the rumors before they became official inquiries. He came to Wei's room. She still kept her own space, still maintained the fiction for the household staff. Late one night, and his face told her everything. They are looking for you, he said without preamble. Not you specifically, not yet. But they are looking for anyone connected to your father. It is only a matter of time. Wei had known this was coming. Some part of her had always known. The borrowed time was ending. I can leave, she said. Disappear again. I have done it before. No. His voice was harsh. I will not let you spend the rest of your life running. What other option is there? He took her hands. Let me protect you. Publicly. I can petition the emperor. I have enough favor, enough history of service. I can claim you as part of my household, can argue that the sins of the father should not extend to a daughter who was a child when he died. You would have to acknowledge what I am, Wei said. Who I am. The disguise would be impossible to maintain. Yes. She pulled away from him, paced to the window. Outside, the garden was in bloom, peonies and early roses. She had painted this view 100 times. She knew every tree, every stone. This place had been safety and home, and more than she had ever thought to have again. But safety built on lies was always temporary. If you do this, she said slowly, if you claim me publicly, it will create scandal. Questions about why I was here, what our relationship is. They will assume. People will talk. Let them talk. You could lose position, reputation. I have killed enough of the emperor's enemies to be forgiven some eccentricity, remember, and I am tired of other people's opinions mattering more than my own happiness. He came to stand behind her. Wei, let me do this. Let me give you something more than borrowed time. She wanted to say yes, wanted it so badly it hurt, but she thought of Jingshan's mother, of her own mother, of all the women who had sacrificed themselves to keep others safe. What about Jingshan? She asked. If there is scandal, if your reputation suffers, his father could use it as an excuse to take him back. Zhaoyun was quiet for a moment. You are right, he said finally. That is a risk. Then you have your answer. No. His hands settled on her shoulders. Then we asked Jingshan. He is old enough to understand, old enough to have a say in what risks we take on his behalf. So they asked him. This boy who was 15 now, and thoughtful in the way of young people who had learned early that the world was complicated. They explained the situation, the danger, the choices. Jingshan listened with his mother's serious eyes. Then he said, Will Wei be safe if we do this? Safer than she is now, Zhaoyun said. Not perfectly safe, but better. Then we do it. Jingshan looked at Wei. You have been risking yourself for years. Let us risk something for you. Jingshan, if your father, my father is a bully who wants me to be small and afraid. You and cousin Shen taught me I do not have to be those things. If he tries to take me back, I will fight him. I am old enough now. I have a voice. He smiled, fierce and bright. Besides, mother will help. She is done making herself smaller. She told me so the last time she visited. Wei looked at this boy she had taught to paint, who had somehow taught her just as much about courage. When did you get so wise? I had good teachers, he said, echoing her words from years ago. The petition was filed. The scandal erupted exactly as predicted. The general's household was investigated. And Wei, Huiying, she was trying to think of herself as Huiying again, though it still felt strange, was questioned extensively. She told the truth, or a version of it. Her father's death, her mother's desperation, the disguise that had saved her life. The emperor, perhaps amused by Zhaoyun's stubbornness, or perhaps simply bored with the Minister of Rights' zealotry, granted a pardon. Zhang Huiying's daughter was declared innocent of any crimes. Her deception understandable, given the circumstances. She was free to live openly, though the emperor noted dryly that a woman of her artistic talents was wasted in disguise, and perhaps she should consider painting something for the imperial collection. It was as close to a happy ending as they were likely to get, but endings were never clean, and Huiying discovered that freedom came with its own losses. She could not be Wei anymore, not publicly. The disguise that had protected her had to be set aside, at least in official contexts. She wore women's clothing when visitors came, let her hair grow, learned to move differently in the world. It was her body, her face, but it felt like wearing someone else's skin. Zhaoyun noticed her discomfort. You do not have to do this all at once, he said. We have time now, real time, not borrowed. You can figure out who you want to be. I do not know who that is anymore. Then experiment. Be both, be neither, be something entirely new. He smiled. You are an artist. You know how to create. So Huiying began to create herself, slowly and imperfectly. She wore women's robes when it suited her, and men's clothing when it did not. She let her hair grow, but kept it in styles that were ambiguous. She signed her paintings with her father's name and her own, a double legacy. She was woman and artist and survivor and something that had no clean name, and slowly she learned to be comfortable in that ambiguity. She painted the 4 seasons again, a new version. This time, winter showed 2 figures in a garden, not just cranes, but people, standing together against the cold. It was the most honest thing she had ever created. Jingshan's father did try to reclaim him, citing the scandal as evidence of an unsuitable environment. But Jingshan's mother, who had been quiet for so long, spoke up. She filed for separation on the grounds of cruelty, a bold move that shocked the family. And Jingshan himself, old enough now to have legal say, chose to stay with Zhaoyun. I am not going back to being small, he told his father in the formal hearing. You wanted me to be a scholar and a gentleman. Wei taught me to be both, better than you ever could. I am staying. His father raged, but the emperor had already shown favor to Zhaoyun's household. The matter was settled. Jingshan's mother visited a month later. She looked different, not younger, but lighter, as if she had set down a weight she had carried for years. "Thank you," she told Huiying, "for giving me the courage, for showing me that impossible choices can lead to new possibilities." "I think you had that courage already," Huiying said. "You saved your son. Twice. We saved each other," she smiled. "That is what family does." Family. Huiying had lost her family of blood, but she had built something else, a general who loved her in all her complications, a boy who had become her student and her champion, a makeshift household of misfits and artists and people learning to be brave. It was not the life she had imagined as a girl in her father's studio. It was stranger and harder and more fragile than that. But it was real and it was hers, and she had fought for every piece of it. On a spring morning 7 years after she first walked into Zhaoyun's household with her father's brushes and a dead boy's name, Huiying stood in the garden and painted the peonies. Jingshan worked beside her, his technique improving, his style developing into something uniquely his. Zhaoyun sat nearby, reading but mostly just watching them, a small smile on his face. It was an ordinary moment, domestic and quiet. It was also miraculous. Huiying thought of her mother, who had made impossible choices so her daughter could live. She wondered if her mother was alive somewhere, if she had found her own strange peace. She hoped so. She hoped her mother knew that the sacrifice had mattered, that the girl she had sent away had survived and painted and loved and built a life worth living. The peony under her brush bloomed into being, pink and lush and temporary. All beautiful things were temporary. That was what made them beautiful. The trick was to hold them while you could, to paint them into memory, to let them matter even though they could not last forever. Jingshan made a frustrated noise. "This petal looks wrong. Let me see." Huiying leaned over, studied his work. "The angle is good, but you need more variation in the ink. See? Not all the edges should be the same strength. Flowers are not uniform. They are messy and alive." "Like people," Jingshan said. "Like people," Huiying agreed. Zhaoyun set down his book. "I have been thinking," he said. "The emperor wants a painting, and you should give him one, but not alone. You and Jingshan together, a collaboration." Jingshan's eyes went wide. "Truly?" "Truly. Show them what this household produces. Show them that art does not come from purity or perfection. It comes from people brave enough to be themselves, messy and alive." Huiying looked at him, this man who had given her time and space and love in all its complicated forms. "That is a political statement as much as an artistic one." "Good," he said. "Let it be both." So they painted together, teacher and student, the daughter of a disgraced painter and the son of a woman who had learned to stop being small. They painted the garden in all its seasons, but in the center of the composition, they painted people, a household of misfits, each one rendered with careful honesty, a general who collected beauty, a boy who had learned to be fierce, an artist who had survived by becoming someone else, and then, slowly, learned to become herself again. When it was finished, they stood back and looked at what they had created. "It is not perfect," Jingshan said. "No," Huiying agreed, "but it is true. Better than perfect, then. Much better." They sent the painting to the capital, this portrait of an impossible household, and the emperor hung it in a place of honor. Visitors commented on its unusual composition, its emotional directness, the way it captured something both specific and universal about the ways people built families from the wreckage of their lives. And in the general's garden, under the peony trees, Huiying painted and taught and loved, and learned that the best endings were the ones that looked like beginnings. She had lost her name and found it again. She had lost her family and built a new one. She had lost the safety of invisibility and gained the terrible, precious freedom of being seen. It was not the ending she had imagined when she first walked north with her father's brushes and her mother's desperate hope, but it was an ending she had painted herself, stroke by careful stroke, and it was beautiful precisely because it was true.